Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Timeless Conversations. This morning we have Taraka with us. Good morning, everyone.
Welcome back.
Welcome to Timeless.
Yes, good morning. Nice to be back. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes. Everything is fine.
Good.
I checked the audio and all that on the other
Good.
side. It's fine too. So guys, what are we talking about today? We are talking about you approve, so I am. It sounds like
Therefore I am.
very rebellious statement, right? You approve, so I am. You can say it in many different ways, like you approve, so I am, or you can say you approve, so I am. Yeah. So how are we broaching it? Actually, this is not a rebellious statement, but more so it's an inquiry into why many of us are in the approval seeking kind of a paradigm, and whether or not we realize it, what are the impact, what is the implications of being externally oriented in our satisfaction. Yeah. So
I have a question about this first.
how?
Regarding approval, there must be some kind of norm or standards where this approval, it's a form of acknowledgement, let's say, or some kind of like acceptable or admirable. Approval usually is like connected to value systems. So I wonder, how can approval affect market, economy, or things like that? Can any of you help me understand that?
How can approval affect market?
Yes,
What do you mean?
exactly. Like, we have some sort of standards and values, right, in society. So, for example, in my time when I went to nightclubs, we were looked by the security in the door if we're well dressed, and then therefore we deserve to enter earlier or first, or even able to enter. Some people would just say outside. So it's like we have to be approved. So that's my question. Is there like a standard when it comes to approval or values regarding approval, so that we are able to seek? Because seeking is something quite objective, right? It's not so subjective. So it has to be within a consensus. So my question is, how does approve affect market?
I get the part about approval pointing to some form of standards, surely, but this market linkage, it is some kind of like a bender. What are you looking at?
Taraka, do you understand what I'm saying? Can you please step forth?
What you're talking about actually is related to like what Julia is talking about, a set of standard that is accepted by a collective, and usually it points out to a certain expectation we have. If this person, the way he talks, the way he acts doesn't resonate with me, I won't buy from him, or I will not accept him into what is my norm, my value system. So yes, absolutely. What you're referring to, whether it affects market, yes, absolutely, it does affect market in a larger view. But when it comes down to individual, personal, like if we look at this in a macro, a micro view, then we have a lot to talk about, because it has to start from that level first before we go into this, right? And again too, when you first started asking that question, the one thought that came to me is approval equals obedience. I don't know why. That means everybody is doing this thing, is acceptable, then I'll be very obedient, I won't be rebellious, I do what everybody do, like I'll follow the ship. I won't be a purple ship in a field of ships with stripes. When I say with stripes, that means they're encaged in a certain value, right? So I don't know why the word obedience comes in, that we have to follow the crowd in what everybody think is right or wrong. That's the value system. Like what you said, you go into a nightclub, if you dress all nice, you're accepted into the nightclub, or even earlier, because they think you have money to spend, right? That's the economy. But then again, if I dress in slipper and t-shirt, does that mean my pocket is not full? I may be richer than most people in the nightclub. So that it doesn't, like, I'm not obedient, like, I don't do what everybody does, and I expect somebody to accept me the way I am.
The reason why I brought up market is because it's not directly related to money only, but even family. For example, I know a lot of people around me that they're always seeking approval from the parents. They're trying to please the parents all the time, and they're not being able to be themselves. And they live for attempting to get acknowledgement for the parents. So this becomes like a market too. Like, I do this, let's trade. Let's see if there's, so the monetary trade for this would be some good deeds that is within the filial son or filial daughter. The monetary trade for this would be, and then some good deeds they're accepted by the parents or acknowledged within their. So I think this is one of the first, that's why when you mention about obedience, this is one of the first currencies ever existed to us when we are born. You know, am I a good kid? Can I eat dessert now? No, you have to sit and eat all your veggies, then you eat dessert. There's a trade right from the beginning, since we are born.
There's a transactional paradigm.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it basically everyone, this seeking approval thing stems all the way back to when we are born, and the first idea of the first belief about self-worth. So about self-worth, basically everything all points back to the first idea: am I worthy? So if I do this, I get that. So it become our behavior become conditional, and we all often need to check in. Oh, is this okay? Will my mom be mad? Will my teacher scold me? You know, like we keep checking in into everybody else's standard of how I should behave before I do something that follows my heart. There's no, like following your heart is like there's a red flag, because you can't follow your heart and be approved at the same time. That's the danger of that, right? So it all stems back. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying, so what are the signs that one of very, very common signs of people just not following their heart? When they make a decision, when they don't follow their heart, what are some of the signs that they are doing so, that actually they're not so much following their heart, but they are actually having a approval orientation?
I can try to answer that question. When we are in the seeking to please people or approval mode, there's a portion of our heart that is allocated to that. For example, the other day, I was walking the mall, and then I had a goal, like I had to go to the bank, but the bank is closed due to the lockdown, I guess. And then my friend says, "Oh, can you wait for a minute?" I said, "Sure." So this friend is looking for things for the mom, like to please the mom. So this thing I realized, like, always when going somewhere has to buy something for the mom, and I'm thinking, like, what about other people, like parent, dad or brother or whatever? And it doesn't work exactly that way. It looks like there's a depth to the mom, or need to have the approval or acknowledgement. So I'm wondering here if there is intervention in terms of life quality, or just being present to the moment without having that hook onto something out of that moment. Like, I have to, oh, I'm here, I can make my mom happy if I get this, for example. So I'm wondering if our heart is allocated to certain approval seeking actions that happen on the moment, whether we are fully present, whether we can enjoy life at the present moment, or we're always hooked into something out of this moment, out of this norm, or out of this the present. What do you think?
Well, the first thought that came is that there is a...
Absolutely. You notice sometimes when we behave spontaneously, right? We have this hit, and I go, oh my God, I need to do this, or I need to pick up that, out of just not thinking about anything other than this preparing forward to act on it. And if we put it in another word, we can call it I'm in the flow of things that's unfolding, or I'm having this intuitive hit to do this because it feels right. So we can't be spontaneous and be thinking about stuff. We can't. So we have to be absolutely present for that to happen. Right? Can you imagine a time when you are spontaneous, yet you're thinking about, oh, what my mom going to say and this and that, and you're having doubt about your action? You can't. Then you're not spontaneous, you're something else. So absolutely, you have to be absolutely so present right here, allowing what is meant to unfold to unfold for things to happen. And then you don't think about it, and by the time you finish doing it, you feel this expansion, you feel this joy, like, oh my God, it feels so right doing this. And you don't even think about how your mom's going to react to your gift, or who's going to say what, and whether your neighbor's going to approve of your action or whatever. You don't even think about it. There's no doubt. There's zero doubt.
Right? Yeah, I'm with you on that. In a sense that the first thing that came to my mind is that there is a distinction, there is a difference between just wanting to do it to very naturally because I want to give to another person, from a pure space of giving, compared to a place where there are certain mandatory behaviors. So if it's something like it's a mandatory thing that I do in order to transact for something, to transact for this satisfaction that I feel that I'm a good daughter, or for no reason at all, I just want to make your life more wonderful. So it's kind of different.
You said something interesting. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Taraka.
I call that a calculative move.
Calculated strategy, right?
Yeah, like it's calculated. Everything is put into a lot of yes, there's a certain agenda criteria that you need to fit in before things happen. So it's calculated.
So it's a strategic move, and it's not so much like but even though we may not be thinking that we are strategic, maybe some conditioning is so ingrained that it's habitual that you don't think that is strategic, that you don't think that it is something that is calculated.
Yes.
But this habit might be ingrained in a calculation.
Yes.
When you mention good daughter, it makes sense because we need. That's why when we began this conversation, we talk about a norm or standard of values. So there has to be a kind of consensus, like what is a good daughter, right? And then how to keep that image crystallized and make it like a pattern. Good daughter in the eyes of what? The society, the local society, or the family value, or something. It has to be like something kind of permanent.
Like a norm.
Yeah. Then we put this into something solid, and then we're trying to fulfill this. But this thing is not present, right? This thing here is a concept, right? It's conceptual, it's idealistic. So it's not present, it's not alive, right? We're trying to use our present moment to fulfill that with our behavior and actions and deeds. But if our mind is occupied by this, or this is occupying our heart, then are we able to be fully present, for example? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even in the present, even if it looks like we are giving to somebody else, it comes from a place where it's totally uninhabited or uncolonized by a certain kind of a certain kind of imperative. It is different. And what I want to say is that these kind of normative things that we might be more recognizable in social norms, but even in the particular, even in the unique, relating between even two individuals, an outward orientation might also create a normative kind of like expectation between two persons. And it might not necessarily have to be like a collective consensus, but it could be, so long as the orientation is outward. I'm not saying that caring for other people is therefore not a centered behavior. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that when we are seeking approval all the time, it is like grasping a satisfaction from outside rather than the true genuine act of giving, or of that being that flowing outwards from the heart. It's different.
There's two things about this. Number one, when we're seeking acknowledgement or pleasing others, actually it's not selfless. We're doing for ourselves. Actually, we are seeking to feel something. We're seeking to fulfill a need, our own need. It's not a selfless act, number one. And number two, that doesn't come from our intimate being. Like we're reaching out there to bring a kind of satisfaction to us. But it's not a self-generated self-esteem or self-generated like awareness, like we're reaching out there all the time
to get a satisfaction, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our needs are like pending and depending on the external factor. So if we buy something and that person is not happy, then we feel sad. Then our need is not met, and then we generate more needs. Then we want that our need for happiness just suddenly disappear. But before, we just had the need of approval or need of acceptance. So when we're seeking out there, it's a kind of risky thing, don't you think?
Yeah. Taraka, your turn.
Absolutely. And this, back to this needing to seek approval or acknowledgement, it all boils down to what we do. Is it affected by a certain conditioning? That's why it's called conditioning. I'm talking about on an individual level, all the way up as a collective, social, social, even educational, even government, whatever, there's this certain conditioning, what's right, what's wrong, that how you should behave. So when you say seeking approval from the outside, absolutely, everything is a danger. Every time we do something, we're looking outward to see this person nod the head or shake the head. Of course, right? If we're doing that, can you imagine we're always constantly walking on eggshells with everything we do? How can creativity, spontaneously, expansion, love, joy, and all that happen in this kind of mode? Where we're always like, our eyes is shifting back and forth. Okay, who's smiling, who's frowning, with what I do. You can't.
And our happiness is always so tentative. I
Yes.
love this thing that you said just now about like walking on eggshells. Indeed, it's like it's so tentative and fragile and very, very transient. Then that sense of worth or that sense of
Yes.
self.
So who you are depending on how many knots or how many shakes you get. I mean, just boil it down to, okay, I got 8, I got 5 knots and 2 shakes. Okay, the 2 shake, maybe I'm going to minimize that 2 shaking of head. So we're always constantly checking. That's why I said in the beginning, when you have zero doubt of what you're doing, because it comes from the heart, you're feeling expanded, you feel like it's in a flow, you feel this love coming out from within you, that you want to share it, you want to be kind, you want to, whatever you want to do, you want to give, then there's no constant checking in, or there's no doubt, there's no even thinking about what you're doing, because it's so natural.
And another
It's so
hint
natural.
I really like what Taraka just said, because then people after this podcast, they come to me and they ask, so you don't want to be a good son? And my answer would be, absolutely not. I don't want to be a good son. I want to be myself. I want to be authentic. And when I realized this, in one of the dinners with my parents, I sat down that day and I said, look, I have something to announce. I love you very much. You guys are great. But I would like to have the experience of detaching this idea that I'm your son and you guys are my parents. The love will be there. The love will be the same or even greater. But how about we drop a little bit our identities on that? How we link to each other. Are we linking through our hearts or through this idea of son and parents? Of course, my parents got shocked with that. My dad said, I think you're going a bit crazy here. And then my mom says, I understand what you mean, but we're not ready for this. So I was really grateful that my mom said that, because she's very aware, like I can accept it at this point, at this moment. But the fact that they understand, they took the time to stop and listen to me on this, I'm very grateful for that. But I think our authenticity and our presence should never be something we can trade for. I don't see that as a currency.
And what you say about being authentic too, it plays a big part in this. It really does. There's no pretending to be someone else so that I can be approved or my behavior is accepted by my family or my peers or whatever. Which means a lot of time when we're seeking approval, we're never us. We're the idea of who we are by someone else. Just the idea, because everybody have a certain idea of you, regardless whether they love you or they don't. They have a certain idea how you should behave. Okay, you are like this, you are like that, so you're not supposed to say that. So all of us are always like trying to maneuver between this idea, that idea of everybody's collective idea of who I am, right? So we're never who we are, and we're never natural. The authenticity is so important. You're really who you are. You say what you say, you do what you do according to your heart's desire. That is in the flow.
So guys,
not
This comes into such a numerous layers, because I'm in Thailand now, and people say, hey, I'm in Thailand now. Like in Thailand, we have a certain norms, like the family values, and we cannot do this or do that. We have to take care of parents after they're old and stuff like that. I'm not saying you can't, but what's that seed? What's the origin of that actions that we're doing every day?
where are you coming from, right?
Yeah, is it coming from the tradition and the culture? Because if it comes from that, then my culture, like Korean culture, is even more strict. It's even more crazy. And people say, so you're not a good Korean? No, I'm kind of free from that now. And nobody's Thai, nobody's Korean, nobody's whatever, nobody's Singaporean. We're not that. So how much culture do we allow it to dictate our present moment, or our family culture, or social culture, or whatever? So what I realized that some people are naturally a bit detached from it, and I find it easier to get along with. But many times when people are fully on that, since they become invisible, I become even more invisible, because they're not seeing themselves. So how would they see me? You understand, in the conversation and interaction.
Yeah. It's like when sometimes when you interact and you know that the other person is already like relating to who you should be to them, then that invisibility sets in. You don't feel seen, you don't feel heard, and the assumptions are many, and you're treading the world of their assumptions about you, rather than them or us being there, seeing each other there right now, without these. Yeah. Taraka.
To a certain extent, every one of us, regardless of our cultural background, we all grow up with a certain criteria to go by,
Yeah.
right? Regardless whether you're Korean, Japanese, Chinese, whatever, or even a gender base.
Yeah.
My biggest experience, from this approval thing, being born a girl, in my mother's heart, I don't exist. Chinese, this conditioning, boys are more important than girls. So can you imagine growing up as a little girl, constantly feeling so totally irrelevant, not even invisible, irrelevant in my mother's eyes, because I'm not a boy. So I grow up with this anguish. I wish I'm a boy. I wish I'm a boy. So I get my mom's love and approval. Growing up with that. So in a certain way, yes, there's cultural thing that's going on here. There's this whatever. So even in the first place, where do I even think I'm not worthy to live as a human being just because I was born a girl? Where did it even come from? Right? It has to come from somewhere. So nothing comes from thin air, just pop out all of a sudden one day I feel so, so unimportant, in my mother's eyes, right? It has to come from somewhere. Some belief, some idea, some kind of impression, the original seed of doubt of who I am. So, go on, sorry.
You're not finished. Make your point.
You please go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So, what I really wanted to address, basically, yes, we see these are the situation. Even as this first doubt, first idea, or first self-worth issue comes from, it set a pace for our behavior for the rest of our life. A lot of time we even behave unconsciously, things that we do it looks like, oh my God, I'm doing this for the greater good. I'm giving, I'm servicing, I'm doing all these beautiful things for others. But then internally, there's this, okay, if I do this, somebody else will be very happy. There's always this unconscious attachment to a certain approval thing again too, right? So it all again too, everything we do, it affects all our behavior, how we relate to in our relationship, in our interaction, and how we even give, right? This selfless thing of I'm always very giving. Okay, where are you giving from? Is it pure? Or is it from, if I give, then, oh, my auntie would think I'm such a kind, like we always again to this eye shifting of yes, no. it really, I laugh at it every time I think about I have to do this kind of check in before I behave a certain way. It's very unconscious too, often, because it's such a habit that we pick up since we're young. So how do we go back and correct that, or is it even correctable?
Exactly.
Or can we even burn up this thing that is holding us hostage all our life? It is a belief. It is a certain conditioning or idea.
That is the $1 million question. The $1 million question for today is, yeah, we know how to say these very easy concepts like,
yes.
We want to live centered and authentic and all that. But the $1 million question is
how to do that.
How to do that. Not only how to do that, somebody told me recently, very, 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 very simply and so innocently, I don't know how that feels like. I don't know how it feels like to be truly centered and authentic. How does it feel like? I have no reference.
No, we're thinking about here on the beyond the past on how we were conditioned and brought up. But this is happening even now, and we're building new ones. For example,
approval from the outside. Absolutely.
The other day, I saw this post
is a danger every
where
time we do something.
There's a sign in NUS saying that you can only use this toilet if you're fully vaccinated in Singapore University. And this is crazy because we're not talking about cultural tradition or family tradition. This is like this is being built every day, new things. It's so crazy. So I realize that this also affects our empathy towards ourselves. And that was challenging for me because people ask me, hey, how are you? I say, oh, I'm okay, I'm fine. But then in the nonviolent communication course, they ask, no, I want to know how you are. How do you feel? It takes me a long time to see within, like, what am I feeling? Yeah, I don't know what I'm feeling now. I don't know if I'm happy or whatever. So it took a lot of digging. Why? I just realized now during this conversation that I have an image of what I am. And then when certain daily tasks are fulfilled, maybe I feel like happy or content. But you cannot depend on this, right? We have to be able to immediately say, oh, I feel this, or I feel that, or my needs are this or that. So how are we able to stop constructing this acknowledgement seeking norms, right? Like, you can only use this toilet if you're fully vaccinated. It doesn't make any sense. So the craziest part is that Singapore is able to track everyone. So whoever was in that toilet, you will know, because of the app, you will know that, oh, this person who's not vaccinated has been to this toilet. So they even track, the government is able to track where you are. And if you were there, and if you were fully vaccinated and you were in a forbidden area, how crazy is that? Taraka, you were laughing so hard now I couldn't hear, but I want to know what you're thinking.
I'm sorry. Just when you bring up this topic, I had this visual of the unvaccinated. You better have a good bladder. You can hold your pee in. You don't need to go to because toilet. You're not allowed to go into certain toilets anymore. And for me, what is even more funnier, that's why I was telling Julia, lately I've been seeing a lot of behaviors surrounding this needing for approval, like much more than usual. That's why I brought up this topic, right? And from all of what you just said too, the one thought that came to me is there's this promotion for an idea of separation. You're just supporting that. You're approved, you're not approved. You're okay to go, you stay here. And again too, what we talked about earlier too, there's this danger again too, even without consciously even doing that, without the intention of doing that, right? Seeking approval or not, ultimately it all boils down to whether we accept what is. You're vaccinated, fine, I love you. You're unvaccinated, I love you just as much. I'm using that as an example. I'm not talking about what, it's not political. This comment is not political or anything. I want to do a disclaimer, right? Or whether you behave in this way, I love you too. Or you don't behave exactly as I expected, I also love you. So again, it boils down to a lot of tolerance. For the seeking approval thing, yes, it can be us looking on the outside for that, right? For this, whether we're being approved, or even people looking into the whole thing as the approved and non-approved. There's two ways of looking at that as a collective. Because again, to that come from judgment. Come on, what makes this group more accepted and deserving or more loved than this group that does what they do? Right? So again, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to quickly put into something before I forget. This becomes very religious and radical. It's not anymore about, it's not humane, No, seriously, if you're not allowed to go to the toilet because you're not following or you're not sealed, you cannot go to the toilet, for example. This is coming to a very inhumane society, right? Very.
Isn't all dogma does that? We're talking about, you use a religious context. Yes, it is that.
Well, before we lose this interesting topic, I just want to say something to that, in the sense that we are not jumping into the bandwagon or talking about these very current topics per se, but what is it showing us is that unshakable standards or beliefs that is engraved in that is couched in right or wrong is usually the stronghold which breeds a lot of approval seeking behavior. Like, everybody is looking for some orientation for right to be here on this planet maybe. And then when you have very, very much valorized, reified kind of standards that will make it evident whether there is right doing, wrong doing, acceptability or not, the more you see people like trying to show themselves for being in this camp or that camp, and that kind of situation is sticky, is difficult, because it's a difficult, even more challenging time for us to want to find out what centered is, because I find that urgent when I meet myself losing a voice or losing the presence of having the freedom to think when I'm pressurized that I should already be standing on this camp or that camp. So what is lost in between is this ability to have clarity for myself. Even the space to have clarity, that is lost when the pressure is to be here first or there. Yeah.
I've worked in hotels before, and some hotels, they have ISO, like quality control certificates and stuff for service. And the thing is, when we standardize interactions and we have to fulfill certain norms and protocols, when we standardize, it comes down to not being yourself anymore. And not only that, when I say inhumane, it means we're not being ourselves or humans. Because, for example, you can do everything to fulfill that quality control, to give good service to people. At the end of the day, you have to smile. It has to come from the heart. I have ended relationships in the past because when it comes down to a conversation, it's all about that checklist of, that day I cooked for you, or the other day I split the bill with you, or it comes down to only deeds. And I'm like, hey, but what about connection? What about the chemistry and all that, which is non-existent? But I talk to you and I listen to you every day. But the thing is, when we put a norm of what a good relationship should be like, then how visible are we? How much of us we exist in each other's space? So I'm wondering that too. When we keep that norm of what is a good son or a good boyfriend or husband or brother or friend, I'm wondering, like, when we are authentic, even though acknowledgement is not what we're seeking, how visible we become, or how many people can see, hey, I can see you. So I'm just wondering that. What do you girls think about this?
I would like to say something first, in a sense that it is easy to notice that. It is easy to notice that people have their own expectation. They're actually wanting their own things. They are making requests based on standards all the time, and always maybe it's easy to see people in approval mode. It's easy to see that. It's also easy to see ourselves in approval mode. But the tricky part of it is, so what then? So who am I when I'm in a world that is such? Who am I in a world? And then for me, when I think about it, it's like, okay, then what is it that me as a human being, as me, what is being authentic really, when people don't even know? It's like my whole life, it is full of understanding the world, what is good, what is bad, what is the world seeking, what is approved of, and so on. My whole life has been about that. So how does it feel to be really attendant to the natural self, or what is alive really, and have a space to even hear that? I think that is really tricky. And let's say I can see that somebody who is coming to me is making like a request for me to be of a certain standard, like either a good daughter, a good sister, or good friend, for example, then and how do I respond and perceive, or how do I be in a way from an authentic space relating to them? That is something that I think that is the whole of my attention and my business. It's not so much correcting the situation in a sense that, oh, you are not it's not about correcting someone else or educating or judging them, but more so for me, it will be now like more hearing what's their needs behind it, and I'm trying to connect to their needs so that I bypass this whole discourse about should and should not. Sometimes the communication is not even possible because they really just want you to be something, right? Then I will gently excuse myself from the situation and hopefully helping them to understand why. Yeah, but for me, it's also about that moment, helping to tease out what are the needs there that I can help to address, that I can actually help to give, because I find much joy in wanting to give to you, it actually, there is joy in itself, that it is kind of like playing ping pong, it's like appreciating life together. But the thing is, how do I relate to you? That is the only part that's under my control. That's my first response.
Thank you for sharing. And one of the things that I find it funny is that when we start this deconstructing of what we think we are and how society defines us, or how our family and culture define us, then it comes down to, I don't want anything from you. I just want you to be normal, like a human. And I'm like, what is a human then? And then that's where the conversation ends. Because I don't even know, I wasn't born with a manual about how humans function and what is a norm for a human, The deconstruction come down to the point where, can human be just an idea? You know what I mean? Taraka, please.
She's laughing about the manual.
Like an idea that I become I have to say that being willing to live a life not buying into this idea of seeking approval, first of all, it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of courage to break that cycle. It is breaking that cycle of doing what we normally do, and for that too, I find not only just the courage. I'm not talking about you need to be brave to be. Yes, it takes a lot of courage to be authentic. We have to agree with that, right? And you have to be willing to stand up and be on your own first, like a pioneering. I find that's how I feel. You need to stand up and say, listen, I don't buy into this anymore. I'm just going to behave how I feel according to my own gauge or whatever, right? Not according to everybody else's idea of standard. So you have to stand up. I'm not saying being lonely. You have to be willing to do that first, to burn that cycle. Like all this programming, conditioning, you need to be able to do that. And whether people are going again to, it takes that courage to just totally move past that first. And trust me, even though you think you are alone doing that, standing up, and this is not a game of popularity either. Sometimes when you're doing what you're doing, it's not just how you behave, things that you need to speak up. Like if we're all in a situation, we all see there's a white elephant in the room, nobody's talking about it, nobody even dare to mention this because it's not right to do that, and you stand up and say, hey, what about this? And everybody like, oh, how dare you say that, right? I'm sure we all have been in this kind of situation that we totally kind of step back and hold back our truth because we're not willing to be unpopular. right? We're not willing to, because you bring that up, everybody's gonna hate you kind of idea. I think we all know where that is coming from. We all have that, even myself. Sometimes I hold back because this is something needs to be told. They all need to hear it. Yet I refuse to be the voice of to stand and say, listen, guys, this is not gonna work. You guys are totally in a different planet or whatever. And everybody say, no, you can't say that. So I'm not willing to be the one that stand up and go, and point out that white elephant in the room. So again, to this standing up and be real and be there saying, listen, I don't buy into this game anymore. I want to be who I am. I want this cage or this chain to drop off from me so I can really live my life. And who knows, standing alone like that, everybody go, oh my God, I want to be like that. I'm too afraid. I'm too afraid to do that. Like you're pioneering in this new way of living, that you're willing to not seek approval. Of course, even this idea, I don't want the audience to be mistaken that people who don't need approval doesn't mean they go out and break the rules left, right, and center. Like they go against the law, they break down things. No, we're not talking about that. There's a certain value system too within us that go, no, you can't do this, you can't be rude, you can't be cruel. All that we have this certain principle that goes with it too. But yet you are willing to be like, really, no, I'm sick and tired of living my life according to everybody else's expectation. So where's my life? Because I'm living somebody else's life all the time. So that's how I see it, because we're talking about how do we do that? It takes courage, first of all. If not, just, it takes courage to want to face unpopularity. Is that even a word? Because sometimes what you say, even though it's the truth, everybody needs to hear it. You may end up being the most unpopular person in the room because you're willing to speak the truth or do the things that is correct. Right? So this is what I feel is what's happening. You're the leader. I'm not saying you have to lead a whole group of rebellious whatever. No. You have to be willing to stand alone. But who knows, as you do that, everybody else is going to stand up and say, yeah, I want to live my life like that too, authentically. Like, I want to be real. I don't want to be tied down by all this thing, or this chain and balls and everything, right? You have to do that. That's how I feel. Just show the way and let everybody else make their own choice how they want to live that. And trust me, many people, we're not the only 3 people right now having this conversation. I'm sure what we're talking about right now has been on a lot of people's mind. How do we break out of this imprisonment, this idea of living under such scrutiny, this scrutiny for approval, right? Really, right? Everything is according to everybody. Yes, you can do that. No, you cannot do that. I can't stand it. I'm sick of it.
Thank you, Taraka. And I realize that we could have the option of saying something and like in a group, but I found it more compassionate or more peaceful, I would say, more present when I'm silent and I don't speak out. And moreover, I realize even more when I see people in the US, for example, like these freedom fighters, and they seem to fight for freedom and their rights not to wear masks or vaccine and things like that. That's also another norm. That's another acknowledgement seeking thing. Mm-hmm. So what we're talking about is not being rebellious or anything, but being centered in tune with our moment and who we are, rather than fighting against the system or breaking rules or breaking paradigms about culture and stuff. It's not about that either.
No.
It's much more aware and conscious than that, more active and present to the moment. It's not,
and more engaged. Because you know, whatever that is social justice actions and all that, or whatever that we hop into doing, it might not be reflective of where it comes from. Where it comes from, only we govern it. Where it comes from, how we make decisions, the clarity of space, the availability of options is only for us to provide ourselves. So what I just wanted to add on to what both of you have said, that, you know, Taraka talks about courage, right? It's like the courage to be honest to ourselves, like, to be honest how I'm feeling right now, and what I'm thinking, and being able to be honest enough to, if there is a place to speak it, you speak it, and without fear that comes from not pleasing this or that, for example. And I would like to add that we need a lot of love to do it, with a lot of love and compassion, and that whatever that's being done, to be truly in that space of to be able to be solitary, to know where we are coming from, to feel that centeredness, and then with a lot of love deal with the situation. Because when we put ourselves in a place where there could be a lot of finger pointing, like you're not acceptable, even as you say your authenticity, if the situation is appropriate to do so, if you say your authenticity, then the kind of things that happen, okay, you might be sidelined, or you might be approved of, you might be whatever that happens. It takes a lot of compassion from ourselves with regard to ourselves and whatever is happening. Like, let's say, even to people who have made themselves an enemy or an opposition. Because once you have an approval state, you will surely be having that. So can we live with opposition? Can we live with opposition, not to be embroiled in it, but to be able to see it and understand that this is part of a human condition that is happening? And it might be inevitable that, you know, if we want to be in that truly authentic space, that it might happen, and we have to allow it with compassion for ourselves and others.
I think when we're honest and sincere, we're truly authentic, we don't see that anymore as opposition or someone that approves us.
Yeah, exactly.
Because
Well
the same origin of not seeking approval is, let's say someone is in opposition, we had to change that that vision, or that angle. And I want to share with you, one of the things that makes me feel very lonely is when I talk about these things and people come back to me and say, oh, okay, so we have to be free, right? We have to be more authentic. And I feel lonely because it comes from
not
like,
understanding.
yeah, then then another norm is created. So it's like, okay, whatever I said is actually
Not gotten.
being interpreted as information and not truly seen as in the core, you know, of what we are.
What you described just now is approval moment again. It's almost like asking you, oh, so is that a new norm that you will approve of me?
So it's like, yeah, you're right. It's like another norm, like, oh, okay, so we have to be free and authentic, right? And I'm like, no, I at that moment, I cannot even say anymore, because what should I say? Be present to the moment, and whether you are free or not, it doesn't matter, because you're just aware of of that moment and who you are, and you're just present. But how to tell that? You know?
I remember you often tell me that in situations like that, where, and Taraka also says that when we see that people might still be struggling with certain notions, then your first option is to be kind, is to meet them where they are. You know, both of you often tell me that. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit more of that, because I think that's a very important ingredient living in a world of this kind of discourse happening all the time.
One of the things that Taraka just mentioned, and I realized that kindness sometimes is just be silent and not necessarily explain things to people or shift their paradigms or awaken them from the matrix or something like that, or let's be heroes here. I think kindness is just like sometimes just okay. Just smile and let things be how they are, you know? Maybe that's also natural. And maybe peaceful too. How do you girls deal with this?
Absolutely, peaceful is important. But when you're peaceful and still, that's how you reflect out there and you project that peace outward. But then when it comes down to, I want to talk a little bit about this, about what Julia's talking about, the kindness. And Eddie, you mentioned sometimes, yes, to be kind is you be silent. But sometimes that doesn't work. That don't work. It works, but sometimes people requires a certain input. They need to hear a certain thing. That if it's not for you to speak, trust me, the energy will move through you. For you to maybe, you know, I think nobody tell you this. Please don't shoot the messenger. I need to tell you this about what's happening, about what right mentioned sometimes. And yes, from that too, you just don't know. And then that's when we go, okay, I surrender all that back. Whether the person accept it or get angry or love you for it, we have to surrender that. We take no ownership of that. And then for that person to grow or have a more clarity with what's happening. So that work both ways. Be still, because when you're peaceful, regardless of whatever's happening, it burns up a lot of judgment too. Because come on, at the end of the day, we're talking about approval. It all boils down to judgment of right or wrong. It's still judgment, right? If we burn up this judgment, we just totally have no judgment of what is right or wrong, then there's no approval seeking. There's not even this idea of, you know, what not. who deserves to
that
yes.
idea of fixing that moment, right?
Yes, because non-judgment is non-duality. Non-duality can only happen, guess where? Right here, right now, in the present moment. That's the only way to experience that.
Eddie was saying the imposition of even a viewpoint in a very unlikely situation where it will be accepted it's also a kind of like an imposition. It's almost like a right and wrong tussle already. So to carry on with that, it's like, just to add on, I actually think that even being in the field of right and wrong, in that struggle of that situation will teach itself, because it is such an unpeaceful and unpleasant and empty place to be, that it will play itself out. So sometimes to witness, and it's painful, and that situation is not nice at all. It's painful to be in that struggle of being so, that seeking, that place of being very tentative, walking on eggshells, not knowing when your next happiness will come and when your happiness will be taken away. So it's always like very externally kind of oriented. That place is not nice. So, but the thing is that if we see that in another, and of course sometimes they will ask, and maybe there is an opportunity for us to talk about it, but if it's welcome and invited. But if it's not, even witnessing it and letting that thing happen by itself is a very companionable place to be. Just like be there and let it play out by itself, and that's kind too, because it will lead itself, it will wear itself out.
I agree, and the idea is not to leave duality or leave the right or wrong realm. just be able to be there and stay in our stillness and presence, you know? The ideas, they don't matter actually. They're just noise.
No. And the compassion you guys were talking about earlier too, what does that even mean? Basically, if you see somebody suffering, going through all kinds of whatever, you're not there to fix them, right? You're not there to make a difference other than you step back and not be, not be pulled into whatever situation. You step back and allow what Julia is saying, allow things to unfold or whatever, or you just give a shoulder for somebody to cry on, or you just hold them in their space, in this perfection, and allow things to work out. That's kindness too.
I would like to say that observation can also constantly be applied to ourselves, because sometimes we have to watch ourselves play out certain kinds of fixations that is new or old, whatever it. And when we are observing ourselves, if we can do it with the kind of same gentleness and compassion that we accord to others, then we can let that die. We can let that die in peace without so much self-judgment and criticism, you know.
Yes, self-violence is absolutely self-violence. This needing for approval, because we're totally beating ourselves up all the time with everything we do.
Because how can inherent scripts be so visible sometimes? Because sometimes they're very much ingrained. It might be in our DNA. Who knows, man? So, but the thing is that when we play it out, and then it has a chance to be seen.
Something I want to bring up too. At the end of the day, I mean, come on, at my age now, I have decades of experience and life experience, you know, and things that I did, make mistake, do wrong, do right, whatever. Up to this day, I don't have approval from my family. None of my family approve of the way I live or the way I function. A lot of my friends has come and go. I have batches of friends that, like, great friends, that they disappeared because they don't approve of who I am, right? And all of this, at the end of the day, right now, right here, where am I at? Where am I at? Am I true to who I am because I don't need approval? Am I at peace with this come and go? So at the end of the day, it still boils down to, where am I at with this? Am I like finally being who I am after years of being who I'm not? So it all boils down to that too. Whether I'm, again too, trust me, after this live thing, the next thing I do, somebody will go, oh, hey, you shouldn't do that. We'll be facing all this all over again. But how does it affect me? Does it affect me at all even? Am I totally angry with it or happy with it, with approval and non-approval? So it all boils down to, we point the finger back at our own heart. Are we stable in our life, like of who we are, that we're not affected by approval or non-approval? I think that's what I'm trying to, like, you become so solid as a person, not as an identity, as who you are, that regardless, I go out or I talk to somebody, they love me, they hate me, it doesn't make any difference to my experience. I'm still just who I am. So it comes down to whether you're, the Chinese say, very zai, you know, very stable, very steady, of knowing who you are.
And the delight of even being able to observe our own instability,
yes,
with a kind of like a celebratory, I mean, no need celebratory, just observe that
yes,
hey, oh, I have this going on, and all right, it's good that I can see it, and just let it be, and let it have its own energy out.
So it boils down to two, we still have this choice, like what Julia's using that word instability. Are you still going to continue to be so unstable that you're always pulled off by approve of being or not approved, or you are willing to that came up to again the courage to stand and go, I'm willing to be so stable. It doesn't matter if you love me or hate me. I'm still going to be this person, to do what I feel comes from my heart instead of what everybody expects me. The courage to be able to do that. Whether you're going to prove a point or not, it's not that's not the point of
it is not
not the context. But it just, are you willing to do that? It has to take a willingness too to be able to do that, to start burning up, cutting off all this conditioning that's placed upon us. To this day, like I said, my family totally gave up on me as a family member. I don't belong to that family member. I stand as an individual, whether they love it or they hate it, and I'm at peace with that.
Taraka, thank you so much for bringing this. I celebrate what you say when it comes to when we talk about stability or who we are, what we are not. I see in a way like it will not be stable. It will not be permanent. Will arise in the moment as anything all the time, not much defined. And is this gonna be peaceful? Not necessarily. All the time we feel different things, and different things are alive in us all the time. And the crazy thing is that people around me, they tell me a lot of things like, you're not very stable, right? And you change your decisions all the time. First of all, I didn't have decisions, but I do whatever is alive in me at the moment. And I don't plan anything. So even this pattern of who I am doesn't have much. So it's like, it's a very active and dynamic thing, being authentic, because it's not stable. It's moment by moment. Yeah. And there are times you'll come to me and say, hey, are you all right? Like, are you stable? And things like that. But actually, I'm totally fine with not being stable. I'm used to this. And I'm not talking about emotionally stable. I'm talking about moment by moment. We're like so mutating and changing, unpredictable, all of that. So if people ask me, so how is it to be present and authentic? I don't know how to explain because there are no words. It's just like moment by moment.
Can I just add on this thing that, Alan Watts said this before, and I just super love it. It's like we arise like leaves from a tree. So arising like leaves from a tree helps us to gain that perspective that, okay, we are not like a thing that is to become something. Yes, of course, the ideal is to find that solid place of eternal peace and so on, but it is not a norm, it's not a standard, it's not a yearning. Of course it's a yearning that we be that peace all the time.
It's not a promise either.
It's not a promise either. But to be emerging, we are indeed emerging like leaves in a tree. We don't know what roles are we playing to each other, and it's almost like a kind of multi-dimensional kind of relating with the universe. And to not have a kind of conclusion, but make it like a very active engagement, this very present moment. It is that is the aliveness.
Even when I meet you girls, like I meet Taraka again, it's like she's totally different from the last time we talked. So it's almost like when we let go of the impression who we are. Everyone else's impression, it's also very much unpredictable too, you know.
And that is so true. Taraka, through our times together, we have like met each other like over and over and over again, and totally new and dynamics too, right? Because I think it's enjoyable because I have very few friends who are able to do that, to come totally new, and that's super enjoyable because then we can meet each other where we have expanded and we have become. It's totally exciting. Yeah.
Because we're constantly shedding all our ideas and concepts and beliefs constantly. That's growth to me. Of course, we pick up on new things, but we're always willing to shed that. Just like the snake shedding the skin of last month. Like, it's still me. It's still me. After I haven't seen you guys for like 2 months, 3 months in this kind of scenario, but then I still have this consciousness that is still very very me, but yet I shed all the old stuff.
Yeah.
That's why it's so pure. It comes as more pure and more innocent and brand new.
And that
Because
unshakable thing is the awareness. The awareness
Yes.
is the
Yes.
unshakable and constantly there thing. Yeah.
And that's what growth is about too. Like, you just when you think you're clear right now, come on, you can be more clear. Just when you think you're loving right now, you can be more loving. It can be more still, it can be more free. We can always be more, right? So who I am 2 months ago, 3 months ago, I love that. But right now, this me, I love even more because it's always created brand new. That instability, I absolutely understand where you're coming from with that unpredictability. Because come on, if not, we are all just in little boxes, like the whole universe, everyone is in little boxes, all this calculation, this pigeonhole we live in, we don't. That's what makes it even more amazing way of living, is to come out of this pigeon box and be authentic and not seeking any approval, even approval from yourself. Have you thought about that?
Oh yeah.
Sometimes we not just from others, even approval from ourselves. We go, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, am I doing this right? This is correct. We're still even trashing ourselves because we are seeking approval still.
And I'd like to say that we are like 1.5 hours into this already.
Yes.
And we can leave more for another day. But
Yes.
we have actually covered quite a lot of ground. We have said that each of you have offered like how to navigate the more gray area of being in this world from our own perspective, to talk about courage, to talk about being compassionate to the self and others, and various things. So can we just like go around, like give the audience one parting gem from each of you?
Well, for me today, this session was a real deep meditation for me. And well, first of all, I want to thank Taraka for being here. I mean, I didn't realize I miss her so much. Only after I saw and I heard her speak, I was so happy and grateful for that. And yeah, I feel very encouraged and to be present and be whatever it is in the moment, because my need for acceptance and being with you grows. I don't feel lonely, and like Taraka said, we're not the only three ones here. So I don't have much anything to tell everyone else, even our audience, besides showing my appreciation for them being here and all of you here. Yeah. Thank you.
Taraka?
For me, what come for me to say, even though it sounds very cliche, like uh, if I only one last sentence to say is be kind to yourself. Be kind. We always think about to others. Be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up seeking that approval. Don't live in that universe of constantly walking on eggshell. Be kind to yourself. That's really a form of non-self violence. That's all I have. I mean, after that, how you going to build an idea or whatever around it? That's your choice. But non-self violence of living is absolutely the way to go.
Excellent. And for me, I would say to trust. To trust whatever that you see that is happening as an opportunity to see yourself and to embrace that self that might have been lost in a lot of like a should be could be scripts of authority and norms and all that, to find that place, to taste that space of who you are. Yeah.